Kaiser is the biggest enigma in all of Hunter x Hunter right now. Just who is this guy working for and what does he ultimately want? Let's talk about it. All right, so first of all, who is Kaiser? Well, he's currently aboard the Black Whale 1 in an official capacity as a member of the Justice Bureau, which is essentially the judicial branch of the Kakin Empire. They are meant to be a fair and balanced and ultimately neutral part of Kakin. So we're first introduced to Kaiser when he is dispatched by the Justice Bureau to go investigate the silent majority situation. And specifically, he was sent to Queen Seiko's room in order to question her for her involvement in it because it was one of her maids, Lowberry, that was one of the prime initial suspects for the silent majority stuff. And it's because of that that Kaiser found himself in the same room as Melody. And it's from here where things start to get weird. Because it's here that Kaiser got the opportunity to hear Melody perform for the very first time. And although you may not be able to tell from looking at his face or reaction, he very much enjoyed this. He liked it so much, in fact, that he essentially fell in love with Melody right there on the spot, to the point where he is now risking his entire career and his life in order to help her and to help Prince Fugetsu. And sure, at face value, that alone is quite strange and might make you ask, hey, is there an ulterior motive here? But what makes it even weirder is that when he's giving this declaration of love and at a few other points in the manga, he doesn't change his heartbeat at all. Melody says it is as steady as a metronome, which is quite strange because if you recall, Melody has very fine-tuned ears and she can tell when people are nervous or when they're scared or when they're in love or passionate about something, and Kaiser's heartbeat never changes. And let's be clear here, these aren't just empty words from Kaiser because he has actually helped Melody and Fugetsu a ton. Basically, ever since Kacho and Fugetsu tried to escape the Black Whale, which led to Prince Kacho's untimely death, he has been protecting them. He primarily has protected Melody by keeping her in the custody of the Justice Bureau. Basically, under false pretenses, she's being investigated for her role in that escape attempt. But he's really doing it so that she doesn't have to answer the summons of the other princes who want to meet with her and use her as a weapon ever since they discovered her ability and the way she can put people into a trance with her music, right? And he has also been protecting Prince Fugetsu ever since that moment. But additionally, even far beyond just protecting them, he is actively trying to help them win the succession war by taking out the other princes. He has openly shared top secret confidential information from the Justice Bureau with the two of them as part of their schemes, going around giving letters to all of the other princes in order to facilitate, chaos and misinformation. But even beyond that, he openly wants to take out all of the other princes for them to help protect Melody and to help ensure that Fugetsu becomes the one on the throne. And all of this is because he likes Melody and also because he thinks Fugetsu would be a good change for the Empire. So this man uproots everything he stood for, everything he's worked for in an instant because he really liked her song. So that alone is more than enough reason to be suspicious of him and his potential ulterior motives, right? But again, on top of that, he also has this emotionless robotic heartbeat, which Melody points out multiple times, right? Here's another example. Even in this hateful situation, your heart is as calm as ever, or I can't even hear the faintest change to his heartbeat. So as long as I can't determine if he's lying, I have to be prudent and assume that he is an enemy. But for now, we still obviously have value to him or whoever's manipulating him. And speaking of manipulation, that is one of Melody's leading theories right now. She even thinks to herself that many manipulators tend to present themselves as non-power users. So that could be why Kaiser is feigning ignorance to discovering all of this nin and special powers and stuff, when really he knows all about it and he himself is a manipulator. Or he's being manipulated by someone else, which could also explain why his heartbeat never fluctuates. And I really don't think this is a case of Kaiser just being that detached from his emotions and that in control of his heartbeat, or being just that good of a liar, because Melody's whole thing is reading people based on their heartbeats, and this isn't her first rodeo. She's been around powerful nin users before. She's been around powerful manipulators before, and she's certainly been around very just stone cold killers and liars before, with Kurapika and Krollo to name a few, right? And she classifies Kaiser as in a league of his own. I simply can't rule out the possibility that he's being manipulated. His heartbeat is that abnormal for what he's saying. So if there is something going on with Kaiser, be it that he's being manipulated or that he's not, but he just has ulterior motives, what are they and who is he working for? So how are we going to figure this out? Well, let's take a look at just who his actions might benefit, right? Because Kaiser is an enigma, but one thing about him is clear. He's willing to get his hands dirty. Basically, at every turn, this man is suggesting assassination plots and massacres, right? So who might that actually benefit? And I think there's a couple options here. The first is that, let's assume he's telling the truth, right? He really does think Fugetsu would be a good ruler and he wants to change the system. So he's being honest with Melody and he really does want to help them. Okay. Option 2 is that he's secretly working for one of the other princes. And so everything he's doing is trying to help that prince win the succession war by taking out as many of the other princes as he can. And he's just going to tell Melody and Fugetsu what they need to hear in order to help him accomplish that. Because again, they've got really powerful abilities, right? Melody can put people to sleep. Fugetsu can fast travel all over the Black Whale. Those are prime assassination tools. So maybe he's working for another prince. Option 3 is that he's working for another party altogether. And there's multiple options within this option, right? Maybe he's working with Pariston and Beyond to help facilitate whatever their grand machinations are, which we know there are some, right? Or maybe he's working with Morena, who we know just wants to sow chaos on the ship, and killing basically all of these people would certainly accomplish that. Or maybe the Justice Bureau in and of itself has its own aims and aspirations and wants to take over the government, based on their way of doing things. So perhaps he's just trying to remove every other piece off the board to set up a Justice Bureau coup, right? So I think there's 3 main options here. He really is helping Melody, he's helping another prince, or he's helping another party entirely. But let's see if we can take this a step further. Because let's just take a look at what would actually happen if Kaiser's first plan had gone through, the one where he wanted to take out all of the princes at once. If that had happened, the Black Whale would have been sent into a state of complete anarchy, right? Martial law might have been declared. It would have absolutely been a state of national emergency. All hell would have broken loose and it would have been absolute chaos. So we got to think, who does that really serve? But obviously they don't go through with that plan, so maybe it's not worth delving too much into. Let's talk about what the plan they do decide to go with is, and that's not to assassinate all the princes, but to specifically take out Prince Luzurus, because they believe him to be the one responsible for cursing Prince Fugetsu, and they want to save her, right? So, okay, yeah, well, if you just take out one prince, it's not going to cause that much chaos. Other princes have already died, right? Well, wrong, because we know that Prince Luzurus is actually the benefactor of one of the Mafia families, the Char-R family to be exact. And thanks to Kurapika, we know that should a Mafia-backed prince die, it's going to lead to absolute chaos, because that will disrupt the balance between the Mafia families, and the lower tiers are just going to devolve into anarchy, right? And that will be enough for martial law to be declared. We know that because Kurapika makes that very deduction. And we also know, thanks to Kaiser, that Benjamin is looking for any excuse to enact martial law. So Kaiser knows that killing Luzurus will lead to chaos and martial law, and yet he is still one of the main proponents of this plan. So both plans that he has kind of put forth or been excited about are both things that would lead to that absolute chaos. And we know that Kaiser understands all of this because he literally takes steps to prepare for it. In this scene here, he pulls aside Steiner. And if you don't remember who Steiner is, he's basically a representative of the V6, the world government in the world of Hunter x Hunter, like the United Nations kind of. And he's been classified as like the safest person on this ship because he has to survive to oversee Beyond Netero's expedition. Like in terms of all of the grander politics at play here, he's safe because he has to be the one to like approve all of this stuff, right? So Kaiser pulls him aside and says, hey, on the off chance, it's like a 1 in 10,000, like this isn't going to happen. But on the off chance martial law is declared and all the soldiers come storming in here, I need you to kind of push toward the Justice Bureau being the ones to have the real authority here. We can't have these, military watchdogs being the one calling all the shots. It needs to be the Justice Bureau that can act unilaterally. So if you see all those soldiers pour in, kind of push things that direction. Oh, and also push this button for me. So, for better or worse, we know that Kaiser wants to incite chaos on the Black Whale to lead to a state of national emergency, to hopefully lead to a place where he can consolidate power for the Justice Bureau. Now, the question of why is still there, because you could make an argument that because he works for the Justice Bureau, if they're the ones in charge, then he can best serve whoever it is he may be working for. Whether that is he truly wants to help Melody, that is he's working for another prince, or that is he's working for another party, right? So, every option is still on the table, but I think this definitely colors those options a bit, the fact that he's going to these links to set these things up this way. So let's take a deeper look at these possibilities, starting with the option that Kaiser is not working for anyone. So all of his actions, everything he's doing has been because he wants to. His strings aren't being pulled by anyone else. And as part of this option, I do want to give a quick shout out to Pig Catapult, who says maybe Kaiser is manipulating himself. And this is an interesting angle to take with this option. And this would be that he is an end user and is a manipulator and is manipulating himself in order to be unreadable, right? Because as a member of such a powerful organization in such a chaotic environment, right, it might be wise to manipulate yourself so that no one else can manipulate you, right? And be able to perform your task with a level of clear-headedness. So I do think that's on the table, but one thing I want to point out is that if Kaiser is being manipulated, whether it is by himself or by a third party, then that manipulation couldn't have anything to do with Melody, because Kaiser did not know what Melody's ability was until after we had seen him being robotic, right? So it could certainly be a case of he was being manipulated and then was presented with this weapon in Melody and so went from there. But at the very least, it wasn't a situation of, okay, let's manipulate Kaiser to get to Melody, because those lines had already crossed beforehand, if that makes sense. But anyway, let's talk about this. All right, so let's assume that Kaiser truly is just working on his own and that he is manipulating himself as to explain why Melody can't get a read on him and why he's kind of an emotionless robot at points, right? And again, the reason he might be manipulating himself is just to protect himself in this high stakes situation. I do feel like all of that could make sense in this story and would also be a nice little twist on what we've been set up to expect, right? Because Melody doesn't trust this guy, which begs us as readers to be like, okay, who is he working for? So it might be interesting if he truly wasn't and he truly did just like Melody, which also plays into her whole narrative, right? Of like inner beauty, right? So I think it would be cool if Kaiser really did like her. Now, that kind of point aside, I do think there are a couple moments with Kaiser that could also kind of shed some light on him not working for anybody else. The first is when he bows to Basho. After Basho gives Fugetsu the haiku to help her, he turns around and bows him and thanks him. This is a completely unnecessary gesture, especially for somebody that is being manipulated, right? Like, this speaks more to his true feelings and intentions, in my opinion, because I don't think this could have been something that had been pre-programmed by manipulation, right? Bow graciously to a random guard if he happens to help Fugetsu. And I don't claim to know the true nature of the programming of how a manipulation ability works, but this moment just feels kind of strange to include, and it feels to me like it's speaking to his true character, which means maybe he really does care about Fugetsu, right? And on top of that, also notice Melody is not here in this situation, so this is not an act to like get in her good graces. Now, Fugetsu is, but Fugetsu doesn't know anything that's going on here, right? She doesn't understand that she has these curses on her. Anyway, I'm getting beside the point. Another time that we have an instance like this is when Kaiser is talking to one of Prince Hulkenberg's men, and he says, hey, I'm willing to act outside my role as the Bureau's head and back Prince Hulkenberg if he protects Prince Fugetsu, which is pretty crazy, right? He's basically admitting to a stranger and potential enemy even that like, hey, I'll go behind the Bureau's back and help Hulkenberg as long as he promises to protect Fugetsu. And the two of them are in a room alone here. So like, he doesn't need to say that to like get in Fugetsu or get in Melody's good graces, right? The only person he could potentially be manipulating here would be Hulkenberg, separated by 1 degree, right? He would hope that Wario would go back and tell Hulkenberg how good a guy he is. And that is certainly possible. But again, I just don't think this was necessary. So I think it also kind of speaks to his potential true intentions of wanting to help Fugetsu. So ultimately, I think it's possible that Kaiser could be just working for himself, but it's a little rough around the edges. And if anything, I would more so lean that it's a situation where kind of two things are true at the same time. Now, what do I mean by that? I think that he could be being manipulated, but also we still see his true character shine through in certain moments. Like maybe he truly does fall in love with Melody, and maybe he really is trying to protect Fugetsu and he cares about her. But at the same time, he has this secret programming by whoever manipulated him to set up certain events. So, as a random example here, let's say someone was manipulating him with the sole purpose of, hey, cause chaos on the ship, get martial law to be declared, and then consolidate power for the Justice Bureau. So that's his prime directive, but then anything else is kind of up to him, right? So in the back of his mind, he knows that he's trying to set that up, but of his own true character, he's kind of rationalizing that in like, okay, well, I'm trying to help Fugetsu and Melody, whom I do care about, and that just so happens is going to set up this martial law thing that I've been programmed to do. Again, I'm not saying that's what's going on, but if these moments, these glimpses of Kaiser's true character are real, I would be more inclined to think that's what was going on and he was also being manipulated at the same time. But it's also possible that he is manipulating himself just to do the best job possible. So that's option one. So now let's talk about option two. What if Kaiser is secretly working with one of the princes? Well, let's just go through the process of elimination here. And real quick, we can mark off Kacho and Fugetsu. Kacho's deceased and he's already working with Fugetsu, so it wouldn't make sense that that would be like a secret plan. We can also get rid of Sale Sale and Momose because both of them are deceased as well. And then we can also get rid of the first, third, fourth, fifth, and seventh princes because all of them requested meetings with Melody after discovering what her ability was. And we know that she didn't go to those meetings because of Kaiser, because he had her detained by the Justice Bureau so she wouldn't have to answer those summons. He did that to protect her. And if Kaiser was secretly working with one of those princes, that wouldn't make any sense, right? So that basically only leaves us with a few options here. And first off, we can talk about the younger princes, 13th Prince Miriam and 14th Prince Wobble, who you can't see in this picture. They are children, right? So at least them personally, it makes no sense for them to be orchestrating this, right? So it's not them. Now, it could theoretically be somebody on their behalf, perhaps their queen mothers, or perhaps Netero if he is secretly one of their fathers, but we'll talk about that during option 3 when we'll talk more about Netero. For the princes, again, themselves, it's clearly not them. They're too young, right? That then leaves us with 6th Prince Tyson, who we do know her Nin Beast kind of has a manipulative factor. Those that read the book basically fall in love with Tyson and start to preach her gospel. And Kaiser's being manipulated, presumably, right? But that doesn't really compute because we know that Kaiser is like an emotionless robot, whereas Tyson, they would be preaching her gospel, right? So the type of manipulation doesn't add up there. I don't think it's Tyson. Then we've got 9th Prince Hulkenberg, and this one doesn't make sense either because one, we've seen a scene of Kaiser interacting with one of Hulkenberg's followers in Wario where he says like, hey, I'll pledge you as long as you protect Fugetsu, and that wouldn't really make sense if he was secretly working for Hulkenberg, nor does it make sense for Hulkenberg's character to have set up this manipulation with Kaiser from the beginning, because we know that Hulkenberg wasn't even interested in actually playing in the Succession War until, a ways into it after he met with his father. So it's not Hulkenberg. That really only leaves us with one potential good option, and that would be 2nd Prince Camilla. Now, to be clear here, I don't think this really makes sense with what we've seen from Camilla's character, insofar as she's been very brash. She just rushes in, guns blazing, trying to get people taken out. She's not one that really has these, thought out, detailed, meticulous plans, which is what we would be talking about insofar as a manipulation with Kaiser from the beginning. So I don't think this is something she would have orchestrated, but she wouldn't have had to because of her Nin Beast. We know that they operate completely independently. The princes themselves can't even see them, much less issue them commands. And we know that her Nin Beast is a manipulator and a coercive type. It will control someone who fulfills its conditions at will. Now, we have no idea what those conditions are. We've never seen this one in action, but she's one of the major players of the Succession War, so it could certainly be that that thing has been controlling Kaiser, in my opinion. Now, if this is the case, then it's easy to see why Kaiser would be trying to get other princes taken out because it wants Camilla to be in power. But it's a bit harder to reconcile why exactly he would be trying to cause absolute chaos and consolidate power to the Justice Bureau. But I do think you can make it make sense if you need to, because if your Ninbeast is manipulating a powerful person at the Justice Bureau, then you're going to use what they have in their arsenal, right? So if you can then control the Justice Bureau, you can use that to put you into power. So I wouldn't say this is perfect or the cleanest answer, but I do think you can make rational sense out of it if this is the case. And that leaves us with the third option, that Kaiser is being manipulated by some other third party at play on the Black Whale. And there's a bunch of options within this one, so let's talk about them. First, let's talk about the Justice Bureau itself. Maybe they are making some sort of power play or coup here, right? And we know that Kaiser's direct boss is Supreme Magistrate Cleopatra, so perhaps even she is directly manipulating Kaiser, or her boss is directly manipulating a bunch of other people within the Justice Bureau to best suit them, right? Now, I do think this is possible, but I think it's one of the least compelling answers because it would essentially be a mystery to us as the readers. Now, that doesn't mean it can't happen. It could certainly happen. I mean, we were at least introduced to this character, so I do expect something more from them. But, you know, it's not as interesting as, say, if we find out Pariston or Beyond Netero is behind Kaiser, because we already are introduced to them as players in this game, and we know that they have their own aspirations. This coming in the ninth inning would just be like, oh, okay, like there's a whole other player at the game now that we weren't even aware of. So again, it's possible, but I don't know how interesting a choice this would be. But something I do want to point out is that Togashi has clearly gone with an allusion at the names here. Cleopatra is clearly a reference to Cleopatra, and Kaiser is a reference to Caesar. Kaiser is literally derived, like the word Kaiser is literally derived from Caesar. And Caesar and Cleopatra, you know, have a very long storied history, right? And we know that Caesar ultimately got a bit too greedy with the power consolidation, and everyone turned on him and murdered him. So, like, is that what we're leading to with this Kaiser story from Togashi? It could be. I mean, we literally know his goal is to consolidate power for the Justice Bureau, so that might be a direct illusion that Togashi is making. And perhaps Kaiser will be successful, at least to some extent, but then, you know, meet a brutal end, unfortunately. We'll have to see. But it could be that the Justice Bureau is just making a play for power here. The next potential option I want to talk about is, what if King Nasubi himself is behind all of this? Because we know that his truest intentions for this voyage aren't really to go explore the Dark Continent. It was to create this perfect vessel for the seed urn ceremony. And by his own words, he talks about how all 200,000 people on board are essentially sacrifices in this game. So it could be that Nasubi is pulling strings and hoping to create chaos on the Black Whale to service this succession ritual. Whether that means it literally needs death to fuel it, or he just wants it to be a trial by fire to produce the best possible heir. So it could be that he's setting little fires everywhere to cause as much chaos as possible. We also know that he has a Ninbeast that we have no idea what it does, so either it or he himself could be a manipulator. And it doesn't even have to be like him directly that's, you know, manipulating Kaiser, but it could just be the machinations he's orchestrated on the ship that have ultimately led to that. Now, I do think this is possible, but maybe not the most interesting answer either. Our next option is Beyond Netero, and I certainly think he has a lot of compelling reasons to potentially be pulling Kaiser's strings. First and foremost, we know that one of his children is one of these princes, presumably, right? And he is trying to set them up to take the throne. And especially if that prince is one of the younger ones, like Miriam or Wobble, then Netero might need outside help to help secure them the throne. Because just imagine, let's say it is Prince Miriam, okay? And all hell breaks loose on the ship. All of the other princes die. It's only Miriam. Perhaps people find out that Miriam is actually Netero's son. There might be pushback on like, hey, well, we're not making him king. But if you also control the Justice Bureau and they're going to back Miriam as well, that could help you out, right? So it would certainly make sense for Beyond to have pieces in every facet of the Kakin Empire. And we know that he probably does, right? Because he's had a ton of kids strategically placed just to help him win this succession war. They are literal cursed babies that are supposed to help his child win, right? So I think it would almost be crazy to think he doesn't have people positioned in the Justice Bureau or in every facet of the Kakin Empire. We know that he's been planning this for decades, right? 30 plus years. And we also know that the most silent revolution in history happened in Kakin 30 years ago. So I certainly think he's been pulling the strings of this empire, and it would only make sense for him to have a puppet in the Bureau. So I'm not saying this is it, let's send it, but I think it's a very plausible answer. Plus, we know Pariston is working with him. He's an evil, manipulative guy. It would certainly track for this to be something that he had orchestrated and plotted. Plus, we don't even know what Beyond Netero's ability is, right? He might be a manipulator for all we know. And we know chaos does serve him. Not only does he want to, destabilize and input his own heir to the Kakin Empire, but we know he wants to escape from this plan to go to the true Dark Continent himself. So the more chaos, the better for his aims, in my opinion, which would track with what Kaiser is seemingly trying to do. And then the final possibility I want to dive into today is Morena. And this might be the most compelling because of just how exactly their goals line up, right? Both of them want things to devolve into absolute chaos. Now, insofar as we know, their ultimate goals are different because seemingly Kaiser wants it to point power toward the Justice Bureau, but that might not even be his true goals. That just might be another facet of the plan, right? We know that Morena isn't trying to consolidate power for herself. She just wants to burn everything to the ground. So it could certainly be that everything Kaiser is doing is in service to her in that, and we just haven't seen the final stages of it yet. But even if they aren't fully aligned to that extent, they're at least aligned insofar as martial law and chaos breaking out, right? And it goes even beyond that because there's some interesting things we can point to that show that the Haley and Justice Bureau might even be working together. Because we find out from Henry when he's investigating just what's going on with the Haley Mafia that they are not registered on this ship as Mafia members. They are registered as civilians instead, and that has some huge implications. And he realizes that they must have worked with the Justice Bureau in order to get that civilian designation. And the reason they got that is because it could cause a war. Because if Mafia members kill other Mafia members, then that's something that can just be left to the Mafias to deal with, right? They are in charge of maintaining their own balance. But if Mafia members kill civilians, then that gets the military involved, and that could cause an entire rebellion to break out on the lower tiers, which again is what Morena wants. She wants absolute chaos. So by having all of her people sign up as civilians, they're basically just ticking time bombs if they ever get killed. And this goes far deeper than just causing some tension between the Empire and the Mafia. This could disrupt the entire balance of all of the factions. And I'm not going to sit here and read this entire page to you, but these soldiers are basically dissecting why this is such an issue, because it could also get the Hunters Association involved. Because if they don't understand, like, hey, wait, that was a civilian, that wasn't a Mafia member, what are y'all trying to cover up here? Then, like, every single team could start having disputes with other ones, which again would lead to absolute chaos. So at the very least, we know that the Haley have a friend in the Justice Bureau who looked the other way to help them get that civilian designation. Now, we don't know that that's Kaiser, but it's certainly interesting to consider, right? And on top of that, we also know that the Haley have friends in high places because they had a secret hideout built into the Black Whale from the beginning. This wasn't a Nin constructed hideout. It has Nin portals to get to it, but it is built into the ship, as is revealed in this panel here. So perhaps even somebody at the Justice Bureau helped facilitate that for them. Or perhaps it goes even higher than that, right? Maybe King Nasubi had this built for them because he wants to spark chaos, again, to potentially fuel the succession ritual or just to make sure his heir is the most worthy, right? So we could have a bunch of parties working together here. It could even be that this button that Kaiser asked Steiner to press in the event of martial law could have been what relayed that message to the hideout that let Morena and Borkson and everyone else know that martial law had been declared. Now, personally, I would hope that the button was a bit cooler, like it emits something more than just relaying that radio signal, but it would at least fit. And it's also probably worth mentioning that since the hideout is between tiers 2 and 3, it's very close to the Justice Bureau. So So anyways, that's my 2 cents on this entire situation. I think it's most likely one of those options we've gone over. And personally, I think Morena would be the coolest angle, but I could honestly see it being any of them. So I would love to hear y'all's 2 cents on this. And when Hunter x Hunter comes back, we may find out sooner than later, given where the story left off, because chaos has happened, right? Martial law has been declared, and we get to see Kaiser's reaction to this. He's standing in the Justice Bureau and he thinks to himself, there may still be hope if we can just hold out for one more day. I still have one final fortress, or bastion of light in another translation, which means if he can survive one more day, he probably is successful in consolidating the power toward the Justice Bureau, because the status quo right now is Benjamin has come in and enacted the martial law, but Benjamin is sick and he is going to die. And so if Benjamin dies, the figurehead of the military and the one commanding the martial law, then who's going to be in charge, right? And that will present itself as the perfect opportunity for the Justice Bureau to swoop in and be like, hey, we're the impartial branch here. Like, maybe we should be the ones making the decisions. Now, I don't know that's what Kaiser means or what he's thinking in this scenario, but it would make sense to me. But anyways, this video is already super long, but let me know y'all's thoughts. And as always, thank you for watching.